Hello, everybody. I'm Jan Moray, and I want to welcome you to this week's edition of Greet the Week. I'm also here with my co-host, Mona Duncan. And today our topic is the rest of the story. Some of you who were with us a few weeks ago will remember that Mona was in the middle of giving us some really great information, and then all of a sudden her power went out and she disappeared. and so she's going to finish up the story with us, help us to get going from where we left off several weeks ago. So hello, Mona, and how shall we get started here?
Okay. Well, several weeks ago, the topic was on how to agree without disagreeing, or how to be more gracious in a topic that you may be not agreeing with, or listening to another opinion. And I started out by talking about the fact of picturing our wonderful planet and from out in outer space, and coming in and looking at what is going on today and thinking, oh my, I don't know if I want to live on that planet or not. And looking at the needs and the problems, and voicing an opinion and being voiced against the opinion and so forth. And then we had a power outage, and things went kaput. And so I got to thinking about that. What do we think about things like that? Does that mean that it wasn't to be? Or does it mean that maybe there was something there that was really important, and if you really believed in it, then go ahead and talk about it? So this was not part of the thing then, it's part of the thing since then, that reading a book on physics and talking about whenever everybody thought that the earth itself was the center of the universe. I mean, these were stargazers and people of ancient that really studied the planets and the stars and understood the signs of the skies, and the earth was where they were. That was the whole center, and everything revolved around them. And then eventually we had this guy come up, and I can't think of his name right now, that said, no, the sun. Who?
Copernicus?
Yes, Copernicus, dear old Copernicus, came up and says, the earth is not the center of the universe. We are revolving around the sun. And talking about how everyone was against him, or the majority were against him, and even for years. And he was excommunicated from, anyway, just shut out. And, they wanted, I don't know if they had insanity pleas in or not, but he was just seen as being really off key. That in today, we would think, boy, those people were really crazy. Well, with everything happening today the way that it is, I mean, with the pandemic, the racial issues, the unemployment, traffic, supply and demand is not, the demand is not there, even though we may be demanding it, the supply is not there. So many things that have happened, there may be a lot that would be against us. And so I wanted to continue on with that line of that thought. And initially it was to looking how that holding on to the past and wanting to make today like the good old days is an illusion.
Mm-hmm. How do you know what's the good old days? The good old days change, right?
Right. And my good old days would be growing up on a farm, and all the animals and everything would be far different from your good old days of growing up in the city. Mm-hmm. And just so many different things. And we're wanting to bring them back, and realizing that, what, even today is the good old days for a lot of people.
Right.
I think of my grandchildren. And that's usually what we're basing our good old days on, was whenever we were younger and more carefree, and we didn't have all the burdens of life that.
Because we didn't know what we don't know, because we didn't know what we didn't know.
Right.
All we knew was our little area, our little family.
Yeah. And then I began to look at the fact that maybe one of the reasons why it's so difficult for us to at least receive or to listen to an adverse opinion or someone's objection is the fact that we are projecting hemorrhage onto the future. Mm. And but then the third point is, to kind of give up, realize that those good old days were an illusion, that there's still a lot of good days even today, and that not to project hemorrhage onto the future, how everything's going to hell in a handbasket, and realize that we are living in the now. We always have been.
Well, I like that you brought up, Copernicus and moving from a Earth-centric universe to a sun-centric, and it's not even a sun-centric universe anymore. We're not even in the center of anything. I think we're way out in the outskirts. But anytime you bring in a new opinion, and anytime you bring up an idea that people haven't considered before, it's met with a lot of resistance. That's just the way human beings are wired. And to expect people to accept something the first time, the 10th time, the 20th time they've heard it, it just doesn't work that way. We have our ideas, we have our values, all of those beliefs that we've grown up with, our yearning for the past, all those things coming together can tell us, no, I don't want to believe this. But yet you see how with the riots that were going on, how angry people can get. Well, apparently people got pretty angry in Copernicus's time as well. I know his last book, he didn't publish it while he was still alive. He told his family members to wait until after he died before publishing it, because he knew what kind of reaction would happen, that people just would not accept. And he maybe thought they would have put him away, or they would have hung him, or whatever they did back in those days. And I think that that's part of becoming aware, moving forward, that new things, we're not going to accept them right away. And all that anger and resistance is just how we're wired. And so how do we deal with that so that it doesn't turn so violent?
Mona, I missed, who was the author that you said published his last book after he died? Who was that?
Copernicus. I think it's Nikolai Copernicus. He was Italian, I believe. So
yeah. And it's to realize that, life is purposeful. And with the things, with the Hubble telescope, taking all the pictures and putting pictures, and seeing how the universe is expanding. But, even with all of that technology, it takes people. I found it so interesting. I was studying about that. And the Hubble telescope would take pictures of the universe and kind of gave the idea that it's getting bigger and bigger and expanding out. But yet with all the technology and all the computers and everything, they couldn't read the pictures. So they came up with a free, it's still, I forget the name of it, but it's creationzoo.org. And volunteers look at the pictures and look at specific things that the scientists are asking for, so that you can put them together. And people working together are piecing how the universe is expanding and how things are changing. So anyway, really, really interesting. But life is purposeful, and there's no such thing as an accident. Because we may want to say, well, it is, but all of the conditions were met for it to have happened, or it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
And as we can get honest and begin to look at the fact that, well, maybe if I'd left a little bit earlier, I wouldn't have been rushed. Or maybe if I'd taken my time and gone ahead and been late, I would not have gotten into this quote unquote accident, or it might not would have happened. But living in the now. So how do we live in the now? Well, one thing is to take back, destroy and uncreate all of these projections that we have made onto others.
That's hard to do.
It's not easy. It's not easy. It's just like anytime we begin to think of something as being hard, we kind of brace ourselves to be ready for it. And if we begin to think, well, it's not easy, your mind is going to things that you've done before that's been easy, that's been within your gifting, within your talent. And it's like it's not stressful. So instead of looking at things as being so hard, it is difficult. We're not taking away the difficulty of it.
Right.
It's just
Right.
maybe it's not as hard as we're making it to be.
To understand that it's not as hard as we're making it to be, and we can get through it. We can work through it.
Right. And to not judge what we don't know. And to get real honest with ourselves as to what we don't know. You know, maybe we have more prejudice in there than we want to admit.
Right. Right. So when that anger comes up, you know, well, what's behind that? You know, maybe there are some thoughts that we bury deep inside that we don't really want to acknowledge.
Right. Or we've made judgments that if that judgment is presented to us as, you know, having made that judgment, we just often deflect it and say, well, not me. And
Right.
yet when we get honest with ourselves, maybe it is me. Maybe I have. So the thing of it is that facts, when we stick to facts, facts are hard to rebut, but a lot of people do. Back to Copernicus.
Right. Well, it depends on what data you're using, because there are facts and there are different ways of manipulating data, and how big of a population, how big of a sampling are you making your decision from? Are you just talking about, well, Mona and I have been talking about this, and so we only have our thoughts. We haven't considered Sharon's or Jerry's or Sue's or anybody else's. We've just looked at what we're doing. And so, you know, one of the things, you know, when I was in the corporate world, and I was in a technical capacity, and we would run experiments, and you get the data from the experiments, and inevitably you had more questions than answers when you were looking at data. So even though it's facts and this really happened, it's like, well, but does this make a difference? Does this make a difference? And there's a lot more to it. It seems like it should be black and white, but it's not.
But it isn't. There are too many variables.
Absolutely.
We see things so differently.
Yeah.
We see them so differently. And so then whenever we, you know, we speak our part, and then we ask for an explanation, or we ask someone else, what are they seeing? And then we listen. When they speak, we actually listen, not to just to be polite, and not to ramp up what your rebuttal will be.
Right.
Actually hear and acknowledge the fact that you've heard. And sometimes even if it's just, well, that's an interesting point of view, doesn't mean I'm buying into it. But
it's interesting. It's something you can consider. You know, I'm not going to reject it. It's something I hadn't really thought about before. So let me mull it over a bit, and let me do some more fact finding and some more investigation on my own.
Right.
Before I tell you that you don't know what you're talking about.
And what is more empowering than to have someone actually listen to you, to hear what you're saying? I mean, what better way of showing respect for someone?
Sometimes that's all people want, is for you to listen to them, because they say things and you keep pushing them aside and they don't feel listened. But even if you don't agree, especially if you don't agree, if you just sit there and let them say their piece and ask them questions about it so that you try to understand better, doesn't mean that they're trying to convince you to change your mind, but you at least you're listening to them.
Right. So how do we begin to make this change? Well, first of all, it always begins with ourselves. Always begins with us, and acknowledging the fact that there needs to be a change, but the only one I do have any say-so over is me. So what is it about me? You know, how can I begin to consider what I might need to change? Sometimes to even think about it, you know, not even wanting to think about. I mean, those, you know, you've heard before, those pointing those fingers, those 4 or 5 of them are pointing back at you.
Yeah.
And so it's not to fix someone else. It's not to correct the world. It's not to fix an organization. It's not to, but as we begin to change, we give space for others to change. Right. We give them room to breathe so that they can take a fresh breath of air and maybe see it your way, or maybe not.
Yeah.
And
I remember years ago when I was a young man, first line manager, and I was gung ho, going to change the world and do all this kind of stuff. And I remember this one guy, he was technical director. He came up to me and said, "Jan, you can't change everybody else. You know, you've got great passion, you got great enthusiasm, you know, and a lot of what you say makes sense, but you're not going to change everybody. So what can you do? What can you affect?" And I mean, that stuck with me all these years, and why I'm so attracted to the work of Dr. Glasser is because that's what he tells us too, is the only person we can control is ourselves. You know, I might want you, Mona, to say something or to do something, but I can't make you.
right. So the second point here is to that second of five. One is start with yourself. And
Right?
the second one is to be a lifelong learner.
Right, absolutely.
A lifelong learner, because the bottom line, has anyone ever made you do anything that you didn't want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we may have given in under guilt or coercion or force or fear, but the bottom line is they didn't make you do anything. And they certainly didn't make you change your mind, because
No, absolutely. In fact, you have made me stick to what I was believing before. This is just confirming what a jerk you are.
right, and how ignorant you are.
Right.
And trying to convince someone, you know, you may, how many times has anyone said to you, yes, I agree, but not really agree? Because a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still.
Right.
And it's being that lifelong learner, learning about law and order. And I almost hesitate to go there, but the fact of it is everybody has their own law and order, but it needs to kind of work together. You know, how can we, well, there's, maybe it's called common sense. It's not quite so common.
Right. Yes.
That how, if we would write our own book as to how you are to respond to me, you know, we may put down all these kind of laws and the orders that need to be, like, you can't speak to me in that tone of voice, or you have to listen to everything that I say before you interrupt. Be a lifelong learner about how we are. And looking at the fact that time, you say, well, I don't have time to be a lifelong learner. Well, time is made, it's not found.
Right.
Because time has always been, and time is always being, and time is one of the things we can't control. It's one of those things that, whether we use it effectively or ineffectively, time just goes on by its merry way. And as we learn to really learn about ourselves and who we are and what we think, and are those thoughts, are they drawing life and happiness and joy and people to us, or are they pushing them away?
Even if we're right, you know, even if what we're saying is absolutely right, if they're pushing people away and those people are important to us, it's time to stop and think, you know, maybe I should try something a little different.
Right. And so point number 3 is to quit trying.
Yeah.
And trying is lying. You know, well, but I try. I like to look at bookends. Well, I try. Well, sometimes we use that as an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, just an easy out. But trying is lying. You know, really get in there and know what it is, what your goals are, what your values are.
Excuse me, I didn't quite understand a word. Trying is lying, L-Y-I-N-G?
Lying. Yes. I'm looking at the bookends.
I don't get that at all. That makes no sense to me.
Okay.
Trying is lying.
Well, then there's also
and if we
Yoda.
stop trying, what are we doing this Zooming for?
Well, it's just
Why
like
would you do
Yoda
anything?
said, there is no try. You know, from the Star Wars movies, you know, there is no try, because when
There is no try. It's either a do or a don't.
right, because when you try, because sometimes when you try, you're saying that, like you said, is an excuse. I'm saying I tried. Well, how hard did you try? Did you really mean to do it, or did you just put forth, a half an effort?
Well,
Right.
it's trying until there's evidence of success. Then you did, but until there's success, you're still trying. Let's say you're putting a nail in a board. Well,
Or
you keep
maybe you're practicing instead of trying. You're practicing.
Jerry, may I finish? I'm looking at my bookends.
Okay, yeah.
One bookend is trying is lying because it's an easy out. Step 4 is start doing with preparation, meaning looking at and seeing what can I do. And it's making some preparation rather than just giving an easy out. It is thinking about, it is speaking, it is expressing, it is influencing. It is sometimes verbally saying, I don't see it that way. And I know many times, even in working with the prisoners, and their complaints about taking the classes and so forth, my response would be, I'm sorry you don't see it that way. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking back to Copernicus, maybe as people was again, say, well, I'm sorry you can't see it that way. Because if it is a fact, sometimes we need to stick to it, but it's not in a trying matter, and it's not in an off-putting matter. It's just looking at the fact that if this is what it is, and now what, so what, and how are we going to handle it? And so we start the doing, realizing, well, I've been trying all of this and it hasn't been effective, and now what can I do that will be more effective? And yes, you do look at the result, and you self-evaluate as to whether it was effective or not, and how it could be even more so. I had a lady that I was working with, and was looking at getting more clients to buy into the product, so that it was a fundraiser type thing. And anyway, we was looking at the fact that you make X amount of calls, and the more calls you make, the more your odds will increase that you will get more yeses that would help with the funding of this ongoing project. And the more then you begin to learn about how to make the calls, how to visit the people, how to voice your point of view in a open way, then the more people will begin to buy into it. Anyway, I also suggested, talking about computers and how that they can read. You can look at the data can come out and you can see it. It may be there, but you can see it in different ways, and there'd be different people
interpreting it differently.
And so anyway, her first objection was, I told her about this computer program that would help her. You put the data in and then it'll read it out for you. And her first objection was, we can't afford it. And I said, well, now let's look this, the chain of command. Is the budgeting your responsibility? Well, no, it's not. But, they're always telling us we can't afford this and we can't afford that. Well, if you show the person who is in the budgeting area that this is what, or your boss, that this is what would be more effective, or would be, I think I would see the results easier if I could put it in and have it printed out for me. It goes back to my job is and my job is not. And so many times we are automatically off-put about something because we haven't got to know ourselves well enough to think that maybe I could think differently. Maybe I could see things a different way. And it's being willing to go to the person that can see things differently and maybe explain it in a different way, or at least put it off to talk about it until a time when you can talk in a voice that is more gentle. Because push leads to pushback, which is fodder for acceleration. And then the fifth point in looking at this was just simply to find a good role model and be an apprentice of that good role model. To begin to look at some decisions that we've made in the past and whether or not how and what the results of them were. And if the result turned out to be, again, that pushback to pushback, begin to look and see how we could speak that in a way that would not bring as much pushback.
And if somebody does come up to you and tell you something, what they're seeing, you know, what you're doing and how you're not making enough progress, but they're taking the time and effort to bring it up to your attention, even though you may not like what they're saying. It might be good to listen to that person, because when they come up to you and tell you something that you're seeing, something that you're not seeing, they're giving you a compliment, because they're taking the time to spend with you and to let you know something that they've observed. And it's not meant in a way to be critical. It's meant in a way, you know, I see how hard you're working at this, and you're just not getting through to this other person. Let's approach it from something different, or maybe this something else that you need to consider. And so it's worth listening to those people, because those people are really very fortunate. You're very fortunate if you have them in your life. They're coming in and letting you know about those things, that those blocks that you have that you're not seeing, that they've happened to notice about you.
Exactly. And so it's just being open to change.
A little earlier, you made some comment about living in the now, and to live in the now. And, you know, we hear a lot of that these days. And for me, I want to see how's it going to affect the future. So living in the now doesn't necessarily mean that you just don't care about what's going on in the future. You're just trying to be aware of what's happening right now.
Right.
Is that the way you meant it to be?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is, but the now, the good old days was the now. Projecting hemorrhage on the future can be the now. If you're doing it now, it's living, you know, it's realizing that today we have, well, today is what it is, and how are we going to handle it? And all the news is what it is.
Yeah.
And how are we going to handle it? How are we going to look at it? How are we going to digest it into our own system? Is it going to make us sick and angry and go out in the ugly protest? Or is it going to make us more compassionate as we begin to think higher and feel deeper, but let that not be anger, let it be a compassion, so that we can realize that we're more alike than we're different.
We are, absolutely.
And again, I know I have said this time and time again, but we all want the same thing. It's just, do we want it in ways, yeah, well, that's too gentle. That's not going to, it's like Martin Luther King said, darkness cannot be driven out by darkness. Only light can do that. And anger and hate and discord cannot be driven out by anger, hate, and discord. Only love can do that.
Right.
Only kindness can do that. Only gentleness can do that.
Right. I mean, you think that if you are angry and you vent that anger, that it's going to help you feel better. But maybe it does for a little bit, but in the long run, the anger doesn't go away. And especially if there's other people around you who are angry and are building up on that anger.
It passes on. It passes on. And
well, on that note, we're out of time now. Anyway, so a lot of good things to think about. And for those of you who are here live, you hang on and we can discuss a little more when we turn the recording off. And those of you who have joined us, who are watching this later, thank you very much for watching, and come visit us live sometime. And for that, we're closing until next week for another edition of Greet the Week. Bye-bye.